Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dokkan Battle animation analysis video. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different since you guys seem to enjoy this series. I wanted to see if you guys would enjoy going back and looking at some past essays, taking a look at them and potentially comparing them to what we have nowadays, because of course, as most of you know, for Saiyan Day upcoming here, we have a brand new Majin Vegeta unit. So I wanted to take today to look back and see what the past Majin Vegeta super attacks were like. Take a look at them, analyze them a little bit. Obviously, we have to take with a grain of salt that they are a little bit older by this point. So we will be taking that in consideration, and we can see potentially what they can improve on for a new Majin Vegeta. Now, I do want to note with this video as well, obviously, as you can see here on the Dokkan Wiki, we have 4 different Majin Vegeta, or actually technically 5, sorry, the tech one tripped me up there. We have 5 different Majin Vegetas, technically, right? This one's obviously transformation, but we're still going to count it, obviously. So, the Fizz one and the STR one, right? These guys both came out in 2019. And 2018, actually, for the Fizz one as well. So we're not going to be looking at their essays because comparing them to quote-unquote modern essays is definitely not really fair. And TEQ Majin Vegeta himself was sort of the renaissance a lot of people seem to agree upon, including myself, that is when the quote-unquote modern day Dokkan Battle essays began, was with this unit and of course the unit that we all know and love as Waveku, the Int Super Saiyan 2 Goku. So of course anything before that point that was released, I'm not going to count it just because I don't feel like it's fair to compare those animations. And it's like, oh wow, a circle of orange goes around him to represent the final explosion, or like, oh wow, a ki blast, so cool, you know? There's not really a lot to dissect there. So we're going to take a look at AGL Majin Vegeta's revamped super attack, because obviously that is more in accordance with modern times. That came out with the Angel Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta. And then we're going to take a look at TEQ Majin Vegeta's super attacks. So let's go ahead, we're going to watch through the revamped super attack of AGL Majin Vegeta here. One thing to keep in mind with this super is that obviously both of the revamped LR supers that we've gotten so far aren't like super omega crazy, but they do a fantastic job of revamping the simple animation that we had before, right? And obviously giving it a fresh coat of paint. Of course, this part in the beginning looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and hit the slow-mo for you, boy, here. First of all of the assets of Majin Vegeta really close up look fantastic. The only thing I really don't like here, and I'm sure those of you who have watched this series up until this point will probably expect me to say this, right? The sort of snapping of assets here, the 2 and then the 3, or I guess it would be more like the 1 and then the 2, and then funny enough, he gives us 3 fingers, right? The little I kind of don't like because it is very obvious in the animation. However, obviously it does get the job done to the point of him holding up the 3 fingers. And I have to say, just this shot right here is fantastic, because I didn't even really pick up on this until recently when I talked about, you guys remember, I think it was in the Super Saiyan 4 and actually in the God Boys, where there was some blurring to sort of give you some depth perception, or obviously a little bit of like, oh, there's either snow flying by the screen, or, you know, the lava is making the background hot. Well, what's really cool is in this animation, and keep in mind, this obviously dropped with Angel Vegeta, you can see that closer to his body, it's actually a little bit more blurry as his hand comes into focus, right? It's not blurry in the beginning as he raises his hand up, right? Oh, also his arm looks super jank with the sudden change in transition of the hand, right? The muscles look really weird with that sudden jump. However, obviously he's more, you know, in focus, and then as the hand raises, you can see the background, his shoulder, and his chin actually change to have a little bit of blur on it, which is such a neat effect. And I did not even notice that until recently. Like, I think I knew that, but I didn't, like, process it in my head, like, wow, for a revamped super, and especially with how short and quick and, you know, great the super attack is, I'm glad that they included it. All right, so moving on, obviously we have the lightning effects, which I think is a really cool way to do a transition. I don't think there are too many cards that do something like this. A lot of the time we have these white impact frames nowadays where it sort of shows a silhouette of the character, but I think transitioning from the hand to the body, this is a very interesting way of doing it. I don't know how I feel about the all black. I think I would have liked some kind of white silhouette of him still being in the frame as the electricity sort of went around him. But I definitely like this as a transition. It is a very interesting way to do it. And it sort of makes you think, oh, what's going to happen next? So obviously we get to this shot right here. And before I even talk about the movement, wow, the color and the shading on this shot is really, really great. Very reminiscent of this scene, very reminiscent of this saga. Obviously, there is a lot of very interesting colors that are on display during the particular scene that this comes from, right? The Buu saga is sort of known for its more interesting color palette. And I think that they definitely do a good job of that. Even like having the shadows sort of move on his fingertips, right? Obviously, that is also in part of the aura sort of going wong, 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 you know, like around his body. Definitely a very, very well done part on the designers of the essay. You can see that the little key flares, I guess you would just call them, little bits of light throughout the aura are there. Obviously, the aura is moving. His hair is also waving in the wind too, which is really cool. And the actual fabric, the ripped parts you can see, and just his normal actual outfit, right, is actually moving in the key, the aura, right? Also, the electricity effects too. All of it looks really great. We obviously have this smoke flare up, which is great. Obviously, it looks really, really good. And you can tell that sort of the way that they frame this with the perspective, right? Let me go back a little bit, I suppose. You can actually see that it's forming a circle around him, right? They do a good job of kind of forcing the perspective of that with having it be smaller in the background, having these spikes rotate, and then the way that they're moving to the right side of the screen has them moving to the left side of the screen behind Majin Vegeta. Very, very cool. You have these white flutters as well, sort of representing the airflow too. Obviously, you have some motion lines just for a little bit more impact. Very, very great stuff. The TUR card art showing up as well, which I actually really like this art. I've liked that for a while. Now, obviously, this is sort of where it's like, oh, and this is kind of where you remember this is a revamped essay. So, of course, it's not going to be like as mint as the modern day essays. And keep in mind as well, this did come out with, you know, Angel Vegeta. So we're not at the really, really top tier essays that we are at today. Even though obviously essays back then were still really, really good. Obviously today they're even better than they were back then. But this is still a very good shot, and I do quite like this a lot. The perspective is a very interesting one, sort of like kitty corner to behind Vegeta. I do think that they do a good job with the key forming as well, even though it is quite small. Obviously, it's just a small blast, and then it sort of forms into the oval, and then you obviously get the beam flying forward. Now, I think that the beam doesn't look that great, if I'm being honest, but funny enough, once it's actually fired off and it flies into Buu, it's very cool. Now, I actually want to comment on this because I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen anybody talk about this part of the essay before. And I think it's really interesting perspective-wise because this is sort of like you're inside Majin Buu being pierced by the energy, right? Or at least your first-person Majin Buu seeing it come at you, right? Because obviously it's before it hits him, right? And then obviously it hits the sprite right here. Very, very cool perspective. Obviously focusing in on the key. I don't quite mind the black here, and I really, really like the effects that they use as well to sort of give you the little twing, right? It almost reminds me of like Team Rocket blasting off again with a little like twinkle here. But I think that this does a very good example, or a very good job rather, excuse me, of sort of emphasizing like it's about to shoot right through the middle, right? And they have it spin around too, which is good. Obviously, it has a little bit of effect to it too. Very, very nice as it approaches and sort of impacts with the screen before it obviously runs into Buu. And I think that that does look pretty good. I really like the actual motion lines in the background that are more like anime-esque. I think that they add a lot to the shot. Obviously, instead of it just being all black, right? Which I suppose they could have done since they've kind of been using that theme throughout this essay. But definitely a very good use of them. And it also works a lot better with the sprite because obviously sprite's stinky. But because it's so far away and you're more focused on everything else that's going on around the animation, I think it sort of takes the focus away from the sprite too, which is very, very good. It does kind of look like, I will say, obviously it does actually pierce the sprite here, but when it does leave the character, it does kind of look like, it looks a little bit weird, right? Because it almost looks like there should be one more frame of it, like the tail end of it being inside Boo. But I think it still does a pretty good job of it. And obviously the fade to black with the way that they fade the background first also looks good. But yeah, I really, really like this essay. I have liked this one ever since it came out. I think it did a great job of actually just giving a simple animation of him literally just shooting a blast forward, some much needed upgrades, and I hope that with the new animation they do the big boy what his current 18 key is. That is still okay. It's pretty good for an older essay, but obviously it needs a update with the final explosion. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the super attacks of TEQ Vegeta here. We are not going to take a look at the Super Saiyan 2 one just because it's technically not Majin Vegeta, and we'll watch through it real quick. I don't really have too much to say on it, to be honest with you. I think it is definitely solid for the time, and again, keep in mind, right, this was sort of the beginning of the higher quality super attacks. Even though there are some definite choppy parts in here, and there are some freeze frame animations, I think that there is a lot of stuff in there that definitely set the stepping stones for modern essays as well. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the transformation animation. This is very simple, and obviously there is a lot of things in this animation that I don't like that Dokkan essays do, but again, I will excuse it with the age, and we'll obviously dissect it in a second with the slow-mo. I just want to watch it full in the regular speed. It is interesting too. I felt like Super Saiyan 3 Goku's essay was so much longer than Vegeta's, or maybe that's just me remembering it, but every time I think about these two units, I'm like, I feel like his is like a lot shorter in the Majin form, but still looks really, really good. So obviously, we start off the animation with Babidi looking in his crystal ball at Vegeta, which is really cool. Some nice slight animation on Babidi as well with the arms too. The effects look nice on it as well. Obviously, we have the zoom in of Vegeta. The jump in facial expression is a little bit goofy, but I do think it works for this because obviously he's surprised with his mind suddenly being attacked. And what I was talking about before, I like that pan down actually. I've never really thought about that before, but that is a very nice like shoom onto the scene. That's really cool. Adds a lot of like dramatic effect to this as well. Obviously, we have the cut in. The key flaring up looks really nice, I will say. The way that it sort of forms from the bottom of his feet here, right? And then obviously it goes up his body around and then into the sort of round shape we're familiar with is really cool. I love the red electricity as well. Very unique. And the electricity looks good, sort of just flashing on and off. I will say the one thing that I'm definitely not a fan here, but again, I'll kind of excuse it because again, it's a little bit older, right? They do the thing where instead of making the asset move where he would throw his arms down and then start screaming, they fade, right? You can see that his arms are still up there and you can see the arms out at the side. The lightning sort of distracts your attention from that, but it is definitely still there, right? And then obviously we have the lightning surround him with the solid asset of him just standing there in pain. I wish that they would have had a little bit more movement on that and maybe a cooler hair transition for that. But again, with the age, I think it's fine. As well, I do quite like the yellow energy that sort of envelops him here. That is a very nice effect as well to give the transition into this. And this shot is so iconic. This is like one of the most iconic shots I feel like in Dokkan. Again, transition, I kind of wish they would have had him actually raise his head rather than it being a PowerPoint slide transition. But still pretty cool, and I think it's excused by this section with the eyes. Ooh, that is such a nice way to do that. Let's go back. And I do think that this also, just this asset in general, super high quality. Again, the color is perfect, and I love that it's more of that whiter yellow rather than the sort of like mustardy yellow that we have a lot now in the Super Saiyan sort of style, right? I definitely like this style a little bit more, and I think it definitely fits the character a little bit more. But yeah, so we have the fade transition with the sort of boom effect. We have Majin Vegeta looking down with the zoom in, and then whoo, the eyes. Oh man, this transition is so simple with him looking up, but I think it does so much to not only give the viewer like a little bit of a spook, honestly, but sort of emphasize the malice on display here from Majin Vegeta. Then obviously we fade to white and have him standing there, which I will say, when this essay came out, it was really, really cool that they actually remade the SSR card art for this guy, because obviously it did not look exactly like this in the original version, and this is also a lot more high quality. Again, they changed the colors from that version to match more with the style of the essay, which I like. And even though, again, this is sort of a simple transition from literally just a PNG to another PNG, I think it gets the job done. You understand, right? And they actually kind of use their asset pose to their advantage, because obviously he sort of got like a foot up on the step there. So very cool. And then obviously we have the motion lines to sort of represent the impact there. Definitely pretty simple and pretty good for the time, I would say. Alright, so moving on to his actual animation, we have the power-up. Again, we do have a really snappy transition from down to up. Not as bad in motion for sure, but it is still pretty noticeable. And funny enough, even then, I feel like they're doing a little bit too thick black lines on the smaller sprites. But again, maybe that's me. The electricity, however, looks absolutely fantastic. I love, love, love the look of the electricity. The rocks look really good. Flying away from the smoke effect looks great as well. I love the way that they have it sort of billowing out from under him, where again, they sort of force that perspective, like it's actually flying out from under him and going out, right? The key looks good as well, of course. We have a static PNG here of Majin Vegeta just doing basically Vegeta's technique, right? With all these ki blasts flying at the viewer, which is a very cool perspective. The electricity also looks fantastic in the background. We have the sprite, which I will say, even though obviously, of course, y'all already know my opinions on the Dokkan sprites, mega stinky, we do have a decent shot with one here, because I will say I quite like the perspective that they take for this one, right? I like how it's sort of not just a direct angle of them standing there, but sort of like cocked up, like you're almost looking down on the situation from a mountain. And I think the way that the ki blasts sort of all have their own movement, hit the ground, right? Some of them erupt into smoke, which looks very solid. We have the explosion effects that actually hit the sprite. They do look kind of cheesy, but I think the smoke looks good and the explosions are just kind of eh. Of course, then we have the smoke that was around Majin Vegeta before, and that was formed from the ki blast hitting the ground as he comes up to the sky. Again, the constant electricity in this super attack is super fantastic. We have the ki blast form in his hand, which this shot is so good. Really, really like this shot. I remember the first time I saw this shot, I was really impressed with this. I was like, wow, they really killed it on this one. I think the pan down from his hand is really, really good. Obviously, we have the sort of focus on the ki and then the quick movement to his face. Even though, again, this is, again, sort of another snappy movement. I'm saying again a lot, but I guess there is a lot of things that are repeating here, right? I think, again, excusable because it is a little bit older. They didn't have as much fluid movement a lot of the time then. And not to mention, right, again, he is very angry and obviously very erratic, so it sort of does fit the, you know, character of Majin Vegeta. We have the slight movement here, which is also very impressive for an animation of the time, right? We have the electricity still pumping out, and then we have the movement down. I will say, even though this section is sort of masked, I think that this is definitely a good way to do this transition, right? Where when he actually throws it down and his hand would be thrown forward, we have a impact frame to sort of represent that as the ki leaves his hand. I love the way, by the way, that it shoots out like back from his hand, because obviously this is, again, sort of an erratic blast, right? I like the way that it actually fires back a little bit at him and the ki sort of envelops around. I will say I do kind of wish that they used a bit of a cleaner asset for this rather than a smaller character model. And again, the thick black lines I feel like are really noticeable here, but it's definitely not the worst. And I think that overall, it definitely gets the job done again. The blast hitting the earth actually looks really good. I like the way that they styled this ki blast with the small little lines there, and obviously the blast dropping down. It has a little bit of size, it has some shape, giving it more life, of course. As it hits the earth, we get this explosion effect. The smoke looks really, really good. I'm not a fan when they just do the circle sort of going out, but it's definitely not the worst thing. And then, of course, we cut to the card art, which we then have the final flash at our disposal here. Very, very nice electricity effects again. I like the way that, once more, the key sort of forms in his hand, obviously. I like the way that it obviously grows. The aura effects look great too. The pan here is very interesting, I will say. Or not the pan, I'm sorry, the transition. The pan is really good. The transition from here to here is a little bit jarring for sure, but I definitely like once you get up there, the pan up to his face, I think is really, really nice. And obviously sort of emphasizing that he's moving quick with having it go quick is cool too. The zoom into his face, obviously the asset that they're using here is super high quality. And that transition to it being a little bit more farther away as he actually shoots the blast is definitely a lot less jarring, just because obviously your eyes are sort of focused on the white that sort of envelops him, right? Rather than just a quick cut to another position. But yeah, this looks really good. And then obviously we have the blast come down, which I will say I'm not a big fan of when they do the blasts like this, where it's just a line and a ball at the end. I think it's kind of lazy and doesn't look the greatest, but it's definitely not bad. And then obviously we get an extra explosion with the rocks here, look really, really great. And the explosion effect, I think, is super nice. And that is actually the end of the animation for Majin Vegeta. So I think that there is definitely a lot of things that they could improve on, obviously. We didn't even take a look at the original Final Flash, which actually, let's go ahead and take a look at the original Final Explosion is what I meant to say. Okay, so I actually couldn't find like just a solo video of this in decent quality, so we're just gonna watch the Majin Vegeta showcase for the boy DBZ World, aka Dokkan World, which obviously is a couple of the videos I've been using for this video so far. And by the way, I got to make sure to mention, it would be in there anyway, even if I didn't say it, but if you obviously want to take a look at these videos for yourself, they will always be linked in the description. I always credit any material that I use in my videos. However, I did want to sort of close out on watching this essay and sort of just give a little bit of a reflection on what we've got today. Obviously, there is definitely a lot of things that they can improve on. I definitely think that Dokkan has the sort of style of Majin Vegeta down, right? Sort of getting the Buu Saga art style definitely a lot more pinned down, rather than the way that a lot of the older Majin Vegetas looked. I think is definitely really great to see, and I hope that they absolutely continue that trend with the new Majin Vegeta. Obviously, they definitely are going to have improved animations from these guys, because of course this will be a 2022 essay compared to some 2019 shenanigans. So it'll be cool to see a brand new modern Majin Vegeta finally after so long. It's been a couple of years since we've obviously gotten one. Of course, he is a fan favorite character as well, but obviously, watching this essay, I think it's pretty easy to see how they can improve this. So many things that they can do. Obviously, this was heavily reliant on sprites back in the day. This was super impressive, even just having this shot of Majin Vegeta here. So I'm definitely hoping that the revamped essay of this can maybe pay homage to this animation with something similar, but obviously in a lot higher quality, a lot more HD assets, obviously a lot more movement, a lot of the things that I always compliment in these videos. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will say, looking back at these essays too, of the AGL Majin Vegeta revamp and the TEQ Majin Vegeta animations, I almost said EZA, I mean technically for AGL Majin Vegeta, but I think that they actually stand the test of time pretty well. There are some modern essays from different units that some Dokkan Fest, some not, that I might even put under some of them. Obviously, again, like I said, TEQ Majin Vegeta himself was sort of part of that renaissance of the new era, quote-unquote, of Dokkan essays. And I do think that they, despite having a couple of flaws that we obviously talked about in this video, definitely still hold up fairly well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the super attacks in the comment section below. And as well, feel free to leave your thoughts and predictions on what the new Majin Vegeta super attacks are going to be. Maybe some different shots and angles, stuff like that. And of course, when the new Majin Vegeta finally drops, I will obviously be doing a video on him too. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.